Among Batman's rogues gallery, one of the more fascinating characters is one who is kind of a villain, but is she? While Catwoman does participate in criminal activity, she is more likely to perform the occasional heroic acts and does not share the same attitude towards Batman as his other foes. Through her various appearances in comic books and films and cartoons, Catwoman has truly evolved and become such an integral part of the Batman mythology. She was first introduced in 1940, merely as a femme fatale to outwit Batman, but she had always been a jewel thief and a cat burglar. In one of her early appearances, she also wore a cat mask, but thankfully they developed a better design for her costume with those iconic ears, and eventually was given the name Selina Kyle. Throughout her cat burglar career, she would mess with Batman, and it's clear there was an attraction between the two. She would also jump in and out of her criminal lifestyle, but it was such a key component of her personality that she found it hard to escape. Due to Catwoman's frequent seductions of Batman, and Batman occasionally letting her go scot-free with little punishment, the Comics Code Authority did not exactly take too kindly to the character. She disappeared from the comics for over a decade, as DC Comics took the code very seriously. What brought Catwoman back into the limelight was her appearance in the 60s Batman television series. Initially played by Julie Newmar, the television series mostly ignored the duality of the character by having her continually try to stop Batman and occasionally teaming up with the other baddies. Newmar and the writers really emphasized the cat puns and purring in the script, while still making her a fun villain to watch. For the big screen movie, Lee Merriweather played the role, and for the third season, the producers went in a surprising direction and cast Eartha Kitt. We're now used to race-bending popular comic characters, but it was completely new in the 60s, and thankfully, none of her seducing of Batman was toned down. The popularity of her appearance in the Batman television series returned Catwoman to the comic book pages, where origin was changed multiple times to suit the writer's needs. For example, Frank Miller rewrote her as a dominatrix working for a pimp in Batman Year One, because of course Frank Miller would make that Catwoman's origin. For me, the best version of Catwoman remains the one played by Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. Tim Burton went a more fantastical route with her origin, including a storyline from the comics where her boss tries to kill her off, but in the film she's brought back to life by Gotham City's alley cats. I absolutely love Batman Returns for a long list of reasons, but one of them is principally its depiction of Selina Kyle and Catwoman. Burton was fascinated by the dual nature of the role, and Pfeiffer portrays those aspects wonderfully. The contrast between Kyle's more nuanced relationship with Bruce Wayne and the sexual taunting Catwoman does with Batman is excellently handled. Pfeiffer digs into the role, creating the proper sympathy and menace in the two personalities. After her transformation, she really starts to be in control of these three men who either view her as a foe or a lustful object in the case of the Penguin. Despite the mixed response towards Batman Returns, leading to a complete restructuring of the franchise and change in director, it's no wonder Warner Brothers was anxious to have Burton direct a Catwoman solo outing with Pfeiffer. More on that later. With Batman the Animated Series, Bruce Timm and his team went with the classic cat burglar concept, and despite Batman's usual stoic reaction towards her, he doesn't view Catwoman with the same disgust he has with the likes of the Joker and the Penguin. He does not agree with her thieving ways, but when they team up, they make a great pair. And in those episodes where Catwoman finds herself in trouble, he makes it top priority to help her. Batman himself is clearly uncertain how to feel about her, and that drives their core relationship in the series. Tim and the writers explore that with a proper level of subtext. Batman the Animated Series was always brilliant in its depiction of Batman's relationship with his rogues gallery, Catwoman especially. The aforementioned Catwoman spin-off film was being developed around the same time Batman Forever was in production. Burton and screenwriter Daniel Waters were fashioning the script in their usual twisted style, but then Batman Forever opened, and its grosses convinced their high-ups at Warner Brothers that the Schumacher style was the one they wanted for their future comic book movies. The studio continued developing a Catwoman movie for a while, and then in 2004 they finally released it, and what a load of kitty litter that was. Directed by visual effects supervisor Pitoff, just Pitoff, one word, like Madonna, this film has become rather infamous for its low quality, and it's not hard to list off its many problems. This film really wants to present itself as having a theme of female empowerment, but if anything it comes across as really condescending. It feels like the script was put together by a group of men in a boardroom. Instead of using one of many classic DC villains at their disposal, the antagonist in this movie is a makeup company. Riveting. They put Catwoman in a completely ridiculous outfit that no other version of the iconic character would be caught wearing. The attempts at comedy are embarrassing, where they are the overdone cat jokes or Alex Borstein delivering some ad-lib shtick that lands with a thud. The computer-generated effects are extremely fake-looking for a film that, with a reported $100 million budget, the most obvious being when Catwoman is required to leap over rooftops. We also get the saddest excuse for a detective in the most boring episode of CSI imaginable, as he wastes company resources on seeing if his girlfriend's handwriting is the same as Catwoman's, and only figures out that the same person with fancy technology rather than his own eyes. However, the biggest problem with Catwoman is the editing. The filmmakers are so afraid of losing the audience's attention that the cuts last about a second, even in simple dialogue scenes. It is quite possibly one of the worst edited films I've ever seen, and I've watched some doozies. The one positive I have to say is, surprisingly, Halle Berry. Nobody is going to give her a second Oscar for this role, but you can tell she's trying to make this lame dialogue work, and more than handles her transition from mousy, quiet employee to cat-like woman, though even she reaches a point where she realizes how stupid this whole thing is. Fans complained that Catwoman was named Patience Phillips rather than Selina Kyle, but isn't it better we don't have to associate this depiction of the character with the ones played by Newmar and Pfeiffer or the Catwoman on the comic book page? This one is going back on the DVD. No, it's not. I'm returning this to the library as soon as I'm done recording. Thankfully, Christopher Nolan decided to bring Catwoman back to the big screen in The Dark Knight Rises, as played by Anne Hathaway. With this portrayal, we saw Selina Kyle with a frequency of not knowing who to join in this battle that wages on in Gotham. Hathaway brought the proper snark to the role, as she clearly trusts nobody, and her always changing sides was a fitting choice of how to write her character. There's a humorous interplay between Kyle and Bruce Wayne. Hathaway was an inspired choice to play Kyle, and to be honest, I liked her performance in this a lot more than in Les Miserables. I'm sorry, but singing a song in one shot is not that impressive to me. Thankfully, she was never lost within Nolan's labyrinthine plot, and I thought pairing her up with Bruce Wayne was a fitting way to conclude the Dark Knight trilogy. Currently, a teenage Selina Kyle is starring in the television series Gotham. I already delved into the character in my review of the first season, but I think it bears repeating that she, along with the Riddler, is one of the highlights of the show. There's a lot of fun interplay between her and Bruce Wayne, foreshadowing their later playful relationship as Batman and Catwoman. We really get the sense of this streetwise kid dealing with living on the streets almost her entire life, and how that has toughened her up. Cameron Binkadova plays the role with the proper no-nonsense attitude befitting the character. I've only watched the first 2 seasons of Gotham, but it will be interesting to see the character evolve and her relationship with Bruce change on the series. Whether on the page or on screen, Catwoman has had her highs and lows, but she always remains one of the classic DC characters. Her relationship with Batman is not the traditional hero-villain dynamic, and that's what makes their interaction so fascinating, and why filmmakers and comic writers continue to find new ways to play around with Catwoman. She's definitely one of my favorite Batman characters. See you next time.